So we're scarring a generation, we're leaving them with huge debt, but from a country's point of view, we're not investing in our own people.
One for mum, one for dad, and one for the country.
And there has never been a more exciting time to be an Australian.
Budgets are about choices, Fran, and you show what you value through the choices you make.
This is coal. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. The Treasurer knows.
I want an economy that works for people, not the other way around.
We'll just end up being a third-rate economy, a banana republic.
Just follow the money.
G'day, I'm Ebony Bennett and welcome to Follow the Money, the Australia Institute's podcast that explains economics, politics and policy in plain English. Australian universities are a bit of a mess right now.
It's not quite exam season, but ANU has revealed it's facing a serious test.
Dozens of courses are on the chopping block as the University of Canberra undergoes a restructure.
Culling jobs to cut costs. A money-saving measure made by Griffith University, but it says forced by the federal government.
We need to put an end to the culture of obscene entitlement at the top of our universities.
It's not a one-off. Wage theft is systematic across the university sector.
Recent research by the Australian Institute has shown there's no correlation between Vice-Chancellors' pay and student satisfaction. Universities with higher paid Vice-Chancellors are more likely to have lower student satisfaction. How about that?
Wage theft, an overly casualised workforce, their handling of student protests, and big claims of budget crises leading to job cuts across the sector. But do these claims actually stack up, or are our universities just crying poor? And why does this answer matter for Australia's economy and even for our democracy? Joining me today to explore this issue is Australia Institute co-CEO Richard Denniss. G'day, Richard.
Hey, Eb.
So, Richard, I want to kick off with the big picture. And it feels like to me that every news story that I hear or read about universities at the moment is pretty much negative. What's going on in Australia's university sector?
Well, 30 years of neoliberalism's broken them. Like, to be clear, the unis aren't in good shape. And the unis do need, I think, better public funding and a different regulatory regime. But at the moment, they're in the worst of both worlds. Some unis are actually making quite a lot of profit or surplus because they're not for profit, they're owned by the government. But some of them are doing quite well, some of them are doing quite badly, but they're all quite poorly regulated. And on the one hand, they're not companies and they don't have directors and they don't report to the share market. So they don't get that scrutiny.
Yep.
But they're also not government departments and they're not showing up at, estimates committees and, having ministers and opposition and crossbenchers grilling them. So they're not getting investor scrutiny. They're not getting parliamentary scrutiny. They are getting a lot of public money. They're paying their vice-chancellors up to $1.5 million a year.
Yeah.
They're sitting on multi-billion dollars of accumulated surpluses, but the government has changed things like how many foreign students they can have. So things have changed. We've been cutting their funding gradually over time. So you've kind of got the worst of all worlds. Bad governance, really high-paid vice-chancellors, declining public revenues, and students and staff that are taking it in the neck. So the reason I've been writing about their finances is that some of the ones that are crying poor are actually doing quite well.
Yeah.
But they're saying, I'm poor. I can only afford to do the things I feel like doing, but I have no choice but to sack staff and cut popular courses.
Yeah.
But again, they're not exposed to investor pressure on that. How did you make that choice, Vice-Chancellor?
Yeah.
They're not exposed to parliamentary pressure. How did you make that choice, Vice-Chancellor? It's more, leave me alone. Don't you know I get paid $1.5 million a year to make these decisions?
These tough decisions.
Yeah, that's why they pay me the big bucks. It's so it's just a mess. It really is bad. And I think the government needs to pull their socks up. But until we fix the governance of the unis, no one's going to care. No one's going to want to fix a place where the VC's getting paid 3 times the Prime Minister's salary saying, don't you know I'm broke?
Yeah.
You don't sound broke, mate.
Yeah. So universities are supposed to be places of learning. That's supposed to be the central. But as you said, many of them have really morphed into these kind of billion-dollar institutions. A lot of them heavily reliant on foreign students because of previous policy decisions. I mean, how did we get here? Is it neoliberalism's, chickens coming home to roost?
It is. Like, ultimately, that's what's happened. And to be clear, this isn't what most countries do, and most countries don't have this mess. So it's not inevitable. This is not a global phenomena, like the debacle of our childcare, like the debacle of our aged care, like the debacle of carbon offsets, you name it. Australia kind of leads the world in stuffing up the provision of simple public services.
Yeah.
Unis are just kind of the latest version of it. But yeah, look, back in the 80s, we started to move towards student fees. That was going to give universities an incentive to behave differently. Then we gave them incentives to chase corporate money for research. Then we gave them incentives to chase foreign students. So you've got these publicly owned, publicly funded institutions. Most of their money comes from taxpayers with these kind of things that are supposed to be the icing on the cake. Bit of student revenue from domestic students, bit of foreign, right? But the icing it's all icing, no cake.
Yeah.
And we're not paying attention to the actual undergraduate degrees that Australian students are getting. We're not paying attention to our academics doing the research we need. And the VCs earning $1.5 million, they're obsessed with the kind of business-like part of their organisation, even though most of their organisation should be focused on, are we delivering good university degrees for students at a fair price?
Yeah.
That's the job.
Yeah.
But that's not interesting. That's not what you earn $1.5 million for managing.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question. What impact is this having on students?
It's terrible. It's terrible. And, I'm an escapee from academia. I had a wonderful undergrad degree at Newcastle Uni a long, long time ago. Not the best uni in the country, not the best uni in the world, but I had a really good education. I had a really good experience getting that education. I worked part-time and could afford that education. And I just think that so many people who are close to the university sector, well, I'll put it another way, I don't know anyone who's close to the uni sector that would say, oh, it's as good as that today, Richard. That doesn't mean everything in every uni is terrible, but nobody who's paying attention thinks that education quality is improving, student experience is improving, that academics have got more time to invest in students or in research. So all of this chasing of the icing on the cake has kind of stripped away a focus on the simple stuff and hasn't even delivered the financial benefits it was supposed to.
It was supposed to in the first place. So the Australian Institute has done some polling around what Australians think about the university sector. What did that find?
Look, it shows that Australian citizens really think that unis are on the wrong track at the moment. So only 3% of Australians think that unis should be chasing profit. 3%. Not sure what those 3% are thinking.
Yeah, pretty good numbers.
Yeah, but 3/4 of Australians think degrees should not be more than $10,000 a year, when something like an arts degree can cost $17,000 a year. So there's a huge disconnect between what the Australian public think unis should be doing in terms of their goals and a big disconnect between what they think a fair price for a degree is versus what's actually getting paid. And let's never forget that in Australia, we subsidise the fossil fuel industry and charge kids a fortune to go to uni. And of course, in Norway, they tax the fossil fuel industry and give their kids free education. Nothing would stop Australia doing this except the people we elect. Election after election, our governments say, no, happy with the fossil fuel subsidies. Kids, you might have to pay a bit more.
Council has directed us to reduce our annual cost base by $250 million by the 1st of January 2026.
Sweeping staff redundancies and slashed courses, along with concerns over a toxic culture, created a crisis of confidence.
Distinguished Professor Genevieve Bell is tendering her resignation from her role as Vice-Chancellor and President of our university.
I want to move now to the finances. So the Australia Institute's a Canberra-based think tank. If you live in this town, we've seen a lot of newspaper headlines in particular about just how tough things are at ANU and the budget crisis that they're in the midst of. For people who don't live in Canberra and haven't been following these kinds of stories, what's been going on at the ANU in particular?
Oh boy, well, bung it into your favourite search engine. It's a rollicking tale. But Julie Bishop is the Chancellor. A woman called Professor Genevieve Bell was the Vice-Chancellor. She stepped down recently. Look, for 12 months there's been scandal after scandal relating to the, I would argue, poor governance at the uni, poor cost control amongst the executive, some pretty strange decisions. But while all that's been going on, the bigger picture problem is that same executive has been saying we're in a financial crisis, we're living, quote, beyond our means, we're behaving, quote, unsustainably, and we need to, the ANU claim, we need to cut costs hard to live within our means and blah, 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 all sort of neoliberalism 101.
Yeah.
So the combination of those things has really made Julie Bishop's role as head of governance, as Chancellor of the uni, front and centre, certainly in the Canberra papers. But this is significant for everyone interested in unis everywhere because, again, there's just this lack of democratic accountability and transparency, a lack of investor, because they're publicly owned, transparency and accountability. So you've literally got the senior management at ANU saying, look, I know the audited accounts say that we ran a big surplus last year. And I know our auditor is the Australian Auditor General. But let's just put that aside.
If we ignore that.
I'm not making this up. It is as simple as this. It's exasperating. The management of ANU are literally telling students and staff and the parliament, just ignore the audited accounts that show that we made a strong surplus last year. Just ignore the audited accounts that show our net assets are rising and rising. If you put that aside and you ignore $250 million worth of revenue, did you know that we're $250 million worse off than the audited accounts suggest?
You don't say.
Because maths. So to be clear, I think it's outrageous that the leader of any organisation would encourage people to put the audited accounts aside and then provide so little explanation for their what they call their preferred indicator.
Yeah.
I think that's outrageous, but what's all the more outrageous is that this is happening at multiple unis around the country. And yeah, my alma mater, Newcastle Uni, is doing the same trick.
Yeah.
If you ignore the Newcastle Uni audited accounts, if you strip a bunch of revenue out of the accounts, but don't remove any expenses.
Yeah.
Like if you just pull revenue out, oh, look, now we're not making a surplus. Therefore, I have to sack staff. Therefore, I have to cut courses. And back to where I started, this highlights how poorly governed these really big, important public institutions are because we're kind of saying, oh, look, surely the uni wouldn't ignore its audited accounts lightly.
Yeah.
Maybe the council will have the uni council or the uni senate will have a good look. Well, I don't think that's good enough.
And so I'm no accountant or economist. Is there any good reason for approaching the accounts this way?
Look, what the unis are saying is, look, some of the money we got is from philanthropy.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the money comes from, one-off things that we don't expect will happen next year. Some of the money we've got, we've already notionally said it can only be spent on certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And because we, not the parliament, have said that these special dollars can only be spent on these special things, we think that those kinds of revenue, again, nearly $250 million worth of revenue in the case of ANU, they should be excluded from the accounts. Now, I'll give that a maybe. But if you wanted to pull out, for example, philanthropic revenue, it follows obviously that you should also remove the expenses that the uni is incurring with that revenue. So if you're going to pull out $10 million worth of philanthropic revenue, obviously if you're funding scholarships or grants, you'd pull that out on the expense side.
Yeah.
This is called double entry bookkeeping, right? This is the whole way accounting systems are set up. But what we've got is the senior management of unis arbitrarily saying if you ignore some revenue, but you leave all the costs in, look, I'm in worse shape.
Yeah.
Well, duh.
Yeah.
So yeah, look, again, I think it's a big ask. I'm co-CEO of an organisation. We have audited accounts. If I was going to tell the board to ignore the audited accounts, I would have a stronger basis for that than I think I counted 44 words in 2 footnotes that in the ANU annual report kind of explain why you shouldn't really worry about the following 50 pages of audited reports.
Yeah.
Why don't you focus on my preferred indicator that's not an audited number? I mean, yeah, I still get staggered when I describe it to people.
Yeah. It is really mind-boggling. And you said ANU's not the only university doing this. So presumably, this is happening in a lot of places.
It's happening at Newcastle. We're currently doing research into a whole bunch of unis' accountability at the moment, which is good because there are Senate inquiries at the moment going into this. But again, I know this sounds a bit boring, but accountability really matters. In Australia, most people don't realise that most unis are established under state acts of parliament. So Uni of Sydney was established by the New South Wales government, Uni of New South Wales by the New South Wales government, Uni of Melbourne, Victorian government. But nearly all the money comes from the feds. So while the federal parliament will look into how the Department of Education is going, how the Department of Health is going, how the Department of Climate Change is going, the federal parliament can't look into how Sydney Uni's going.
Right.
Because it's a New South Wales Act of Parliament.
Yeah.
But New South Wales Parliament could have a look, but what do they care?
Yeah.
It's federal government money.
All that money, nothing's coming from them.
So I'm not saying that New South Wales government doesn't care at all about Newcastle Uni or Sydney Uni.
Yeah.
But if you were a New South Wales parliamentarian and you were watching lots of New South Wales taxpayer money spent on New South Wales hospitals and New South Wales schools, what would you prioritise?
Yeah.
So again, the unis are just sort of sitting in this, I would argue, very weakly governed valley, not governed like a private sector enterprise, not really governed and managed like a public sector enterprise.
Yeah.
I would argue the worst of all worlds.
Yeah. Well, let's stick with that issue of governance. So the Vice-Chancellor of ANU, Professor Genevieve Bell, that you mentioned earlier, resigned in September after she came under enormous criticism for the job cuts and a host of other issues. If we're thinking here about the governance of universities, I guess something like that isn't going to resolve these problems for issues. It's not all sitting with the Vice-Chancellor, is it?
No. Big questions here are how did the board, the Senate at ANU let this happen? So part of the neoliberal sort of rule book is find a crisis, or if you can't find one, create one, and then use the crisis to drive the change you want, okay? So rather than make a democratic case, as, take an ANU example, if the Vice-Chancellor really thought, who needs a music school, let's cut that, I want to spend more money on something else. Well, that's a big decision and someone has to make it. And if as Vice-Chancellor she came out and went, I think that Australia would be better off without a music school but with more of this, okay, I might disagree, but at least that would be her owning the decision.
Yeah. But
what we're seeing at ANU is her saying, there's a crisis, I've got no choice but to cut money on the music school. No choice, I tells you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to spend more money on these things that I feel like spending more money on, with no democratic accountability. So if the ANU want to say there's a crisis, I think where the governance failure starts is, well, how far out should you have been able to see this crisis coming? And what was the council of the uni doing before it announced the crisis?
Yeah.
Because someone was clearly there ticking off on the budget in the years leading up to
this. Yeah.
So who's accountable for that?
Yeah.
Who's accountable for this surprise crisis? That's one question. The other question is it really a crisis?
Yeah.
Is the Auditor General that wrong?
Yeah.
Now, I'm sticking with no.
Yeah.
Right. But again, the uni hasn't had to sort of say, here's why our preferred measure, which isn't audited, is so much better than the audited figures.
So for someone who doesn't know anything about universities or how they're governed, you've talked about the fact that perhaps the way it's arranged currently, where the funding is federal but the acts of parliament that establish them are state-based. How can we go about addressing some of these issues in the university sector?
Well, good question. Step one, admit that what we've been doing for decades hasn't worked. If you accept step one, you would accept that more of the same will make it worse, not better.
Yeah.
Now, that would be a big change. No, but no one said that out loud yet.
Yeah.
No one said, look, really, when we said to unis, just behave like a business a bit, that would lead them to obsess about things like foreign students and advertising budgets and neglect actual undergraduate education, which is largely why they're there. So the first thing you do is admit not only that we've got a big problem, but that more of the same will make it worse. The second thing we can do is then think, well, what would be a better way to organise our unis? And to be clear, I think having nearly 40 unis offering different courses in slightly different ways gives students and staff choice. So that's good. I don't think we want conformity across all the unis, but I think every uni's accounts should be prepared on exactly the same basis.
Yeah.
I think that we should be able to easily look into any of the universities' budgets and figure out how much are you spending on consultants?
Yeah.
What has happened to your advertising expenditure? All like that we need, even if we want the individual unis to have agency and autonomy, we should be able to easily compare them. Now, they will fight this tooth and nail because at the moment, only the Vice-Chancellor is responsible for the way they're internally organising themselves, even though it's our money. So step one, admit there's a problem. Step two, we need across-the-board reform in the way that the data is collected and presented. Can you imagine if the New South Wales part of the Department of Defence was reporting differently than the Victorian part of the Department of Defence because the head of the New South Wales Defence Department had strong views about
on his preferred
accounting. I mean, these are public servants.
Yeah.
$1.5 million a year, but public servants. And then step three, and the Institute's written a few papers alluding to this, I think we can look around the world and say, well, how can you run a network of universities that have individual autonomy around courses and things, but are all actually pulling in the same direction? Lots of the Europeans do it better than us. You'd be surprised to learn. But I actually think there's a good model for us in the US, and that is people might have heard of things like UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles, or UC Berkeley, or in California, they've got a system of state unis. And California is a big economy. It's not
sixth largest in the world.
Right.
If it was a country.
So there's enough unis in California to think, how does California organise California's state unis?
Yeah.
And the answer is a combination of autonomy for individual campuses or institutions, but a hell of a lot of shared infrastructure, shared accounting, shared lots of things.
Yeah.
So I think we've got the worst of both worlds. We've got a system that looks like market-based competition-y, but with enormous amounts of public money and with an obligation to look after young Australians and in turn the economic and social consequences of giving young Australians a good education. So, we've got the worst of private sector governance and the worst of public sector governance and the worst of sort of market competition rhetoric with still lots of public money getting hosed around.
You know that I think we've got a good education system, but it can be a lot better and it can be a lot fairer.
We need to make sure that education is an opportunity, not a financial trap.
It's welcome relief. If you have a HECS debt and you're having 20% wiped, that is welcome. But they're not dealing with the thing that has actually saddled people with such huge HECS debts.
As you kind of mentioned at the beginning, it's costing even domestic students a lot more now to go to universities. That's not how a lot of other countries do it. But that's kind of where I wanted to finish this conversation up. The university sector is a critical way that we educate our future workforce.
Some say.
What's at stake if we keep making these mistakes and let this problem get even worse?
Yeah, look, great question. If someone set up a company to make headphones and the headphones were poor quality and no one wanted them, I don't really care. I'll buy headphones somewhere else or I'll live without headphones. We're trusting the generation of knowledge, the distribution of knowledge the training of generations, multiple generations, to organisations that are not fit for purpose and who, despite charging far more than they used to charge, are delivering far less than they used to deliver.
Yeah.
And the consequences of that are wide-ranging for the individual who might have got halfway through uni and thought, this is hopeless and it's expensive, I'm out.
Yep.
So they've wasted their time, taxpayers have wasted their money, and we've just missed out on a nurse or a teacher. But similarly, unis historically in Australia and around the world have been real drivers of social mobility and giving people a way to, even if they grew up in a low-income household whose parents didn't go to uni. Both of my parents left school at 14.
Yeah. I'm the first person in my family to
right,
go to
but
uni.
it wasn't hard for me to go to uni. It was a bit scary. I didn't actually know anyone who'd been.
Yeah.
But it wasn't hard. And our country used to make that really easy. Whereas now, do I really want to pay $50,000? And what if I get halfway through and I don't, so we're scarring a generation. We're leaving them with huge debt. But from a country's point of view, we're not investing in our own people. And if a headphone company tries and fails, well, that's capitalism.
Yeah.
But if universities try and fail, no, that's democracy. And, to give you a concrete example of this, there are 2 class actions underway in Australia where students are suing universities for false and misleading conduct, saying, hang on, you said if I came to your uni, I'd get this degree and that would qualify me to do this kind of job.
Yeah.
And you misled me. So I spent all that money and, I can't even use my degree. And get this, the uni's in court. So Newcastle Uni in court is saying, hey, slow down there. We're not involved in trade and commerce. We're not a business. You're not a consumer. You are not protected by the Consumer Act.
That's their argument in court?
Literally the argument in court. So pay me $1 million because I'm a big businessman running a big business.
Yeah.
Leave me alone to make my decisions. I decide to, advertise a course or promote a course in a way that misleads you.
Yeah.
And when you sue me, hey, slow down there, son. You're not a customer. You're a student. And you don't get the protections that someone who bought a pair of headphones don't work.
Gets.
So this is the halfway house that unis are living in. Not a business, not a government department.
Yeah.
Really, I would argue, unaccountable to anyone but themselves.
Yeah.
But still relying on our cash.
Yeah. Well, that is certainly a dire picture, Richard.
Well, I'm always up for a dire picture, Em. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, but I do just think it's critical that we get this right, as much as it is vocational education, and we've covered in the past, the issues with TAFEs and trades on the other side of the scale.
Absolutely.
As well.
I mean, we know there's such good evidence that getting kids into preschool is important for their future development.
Yeah.
We know that teaching kids to read and write well in primary school sets them up for life. We know that getting kids to finish year 12 has enormous advantages, not just for them, but for society and for the economy. And while not everyone needs to go to uni, not suggesting that at all, universities are just as important at taking the kids who have the aptitude and the inclination and saying, great, let's invest even more in your, what economists call human capital.
Yeah.
So if we stuff that up, it's like building a dam in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
The money gets spent, the jobs get created building the dam, but what's the long-run benefit to Australia of a dam in the middle of nowhere? Nothing. What's the long-run benefit to Australia of spending a fortune on low-quality education? Like, it's absolute waste, not just of money, but human potential.
Yeah, and I always think of, what universities do, and the other things that they produce in at universities is obviously research that leads to great things as well. And if we're not making the most out of everyone and it's not accessible to everyone who wants to go, then that's just such a huge waste. It's people who are not going to find the cure for cancer or the next vaccine or,
absolutely,
invent Wi-Fi, whatever the Wi-Fi of 50 years from now is.
Well, I mean, this is metaphorical, but, someone with the intelligence of Albert Einstein is alive and well and doing low-paid manual labour somewhere in the world today.
Mm.
Like as a world, because so few people live in countries rich enough to have not only a higher education system, but a higher education system that could be available to anyone with the aptitude to go.
Mm.
This is unique. We're really lucky in Australia that even our broken system exists. Most people live in countries where that's not imaginable. So what a huge potential advantage for a country like Australia to say, no matter, where you grew up or how much your parents earned, if you do well at our well-funded public schools and you come to our well-funded public unis, who knows what you could go on to do for you and your life or for all of us.
Mm.
But because neoliberalism, because bad governance, because lack of transparency, we're breaking that in Australia now, and we'll be paying the price for decades. And if you think, what I've just said's bad, well, luckily Professor George Williams, Vice-Chancellor at Uni of Western Sydney, has actually just written an essay for us on, the significance of getting unis wrong and the opportunities to get it right.
Yeah.
And, most people probably don't wake up thinking, I wonder how we should fix unis today. Well, fair enough.
Yeah.
Most people don't wake up thinking most things, but I think it's time that Australians, at this point in history, a newly elected Labor government, huge majority in the lower house, big opportunity to do big change. And, to push an old horse, imagine if we made the gas industry paid some tax and threw some money at higher education that was well spent and well administered. I reckon we could solve a lot of the problems that George is talking about.
Excellent. Thanks so much for joining me, Richard.
Always. Thanks, Eb.
If you're interested in reading more, as Richard just mentioned, we've just launched our new Vantage Point essay on universities, written by Western Sydney University Vice-Chancellor Professor George Williams. It's available now from Australia Institute Press, and it's called Aiming Higher, Universities and Australia's Future. You can buy this edition for just $19.95 or become a Vantage Point subscriber and save $15 a year and get free shipping. Buy it now at australiainstitute.org.au/store or via the link in the show notes. This episode was recorded on Wednesday, the 5th of November, and our theme music is by Jonathan McFeet from Pulse and Thrum, with additional music from Blue Dot Sessions. I'm your host, Ebony Bennett. Thanks for listening.